All right, diving in again with another deep dive. This time, we're taking a look at Kevin Smith's Dogma. Um, you know, it's a movie that always gets people talking, right?
Hmm.
And you guys sent in some really interesting stuff for this one, especially that paper by Brian David Phillips.
Yeah, it's a pretty insightful analysis, I have to say.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah.
And it really gets into like the layers of Dogma, like how it works as a story,
Hmm.
but also all the themes and the controversy it stirred up.
Hmm.
Back when it came out, people were.
Oh, people were riled up for sure,
Yeah.
which is interesting because on one level it's a comedy, but then
But then you've got like God as a woman, fallen angels causing mayhem, this whole debate about Dogma itself.
exactly. And Phillips, the author of the paper, he kind of sets the stage by calling Dogma a modern religious fable, which, when you think about it,
Yeah, it makes sense. It's got that
yeah.
kind of mythic quality, even with all the dick and fart jokes.
Totally. And he connects this to a bigger idea too. Like Dogma is part of this whole literature of the fantastic. So, things like science fiction, fantasy, horror, all these genres that kind of tap into those classic ancient stories, those big universal themes.
Okay, so like good versus evil, redemption, all that. The stuff we've been telling each other since, what, like campfire days?
Exactly. It's like those stories are built into us,
Right.
right? And what's cool is that Phillips, with his background,
Oh, yeah, I almost forgot to mention that. He's not just some random film buff. He's,
right. Brian David Phillips, he's an associate professor of English over at National Chengchi University in Taipei.
see, hardcore academic.
Yeah.
And his specialty is actually comparative literature and religion.
So he knows this stuff deeply. But here's where it gets even cooler.
Okay, lay it on me.
He's also super involved in research on artificial intelligence in education, like how AI can change how we teach and learn, especially with languages and literature. That's so wild. I mean, it makes you think, right? Like, does his work with AI, does that influence how he looks at a movie like Dogma?
You know what? That's a brilliant question. Because Dogma itself is all about systems, beliefs, even the nature of intelligence, right?
Mm.
Free will versus programming.
Whoa, yeah. Like, if God is this ultimate programmer and angels are kind of like, divine AI, I'm getting a headache already, but in a good way.
Uh-huh, exactly. It's that kind of brain-bending stuff that Smith does so well. But back to Phillips, I think it's safe to say that his background in comparative literature and religion, that definitely gives him like a deep well to draw from.
Right, he's seeing all these connections, these echoes of myth and theology throughout the film.
Totally.
Yeah.
But I also wonder if his AI work, maybe that adds another layer, like a sensitivity to how these systems, even religious ones, can be analyzed, broken down,
Yeah.
maybe even challenged. Oh, man. So we're talking about, like, layers on layers here. Okay, let's try to unpack some of this. So Phillips calls Dogma this modern fable, right? He's saying it connects to this bigger idea of literature of the fantastic. What do you think he's getting at with that?
Well, he's pointing out that Dogma, even with its, modern setting and all the humor, it's still tapping into something ancient, those universal stories like we were talking about.
Right, like that classic man versus God struggle.
Bingo. Only in Dogma, it's more like fallen angels versus God, and Bethany, this average woman, stuck in the middle.
And Jay and Silent Bob. You ever forget Jay and Silent Bob? They always get stuck in the middle somehow.
Oh, for sure. They're like the ultimate wild card. But yeah, it's Smith taking these archetypes, fallen angels, prophets, demons,
Yeah.
and giving them this hilarious twisted spin.
Exactly. And it's that twist that makes it so interesting. Because it's not just a rehash of old stories, it's doing something new with them.
And that's where the literature of the fantastic comes in.
Mm-hmm.
Smith's using fantasy, satire, dark humor, all these tools to explore some really big questions, like the nature of faith, the limits of dogma.
And don't forget, God as a woman.
Oh, right. We can't leave that out. That was a major...
A major holy shit moment for sure.
Yeah.
And, Phillips connects that portrayal to, like, those ancient mother goddess figures. He even mentions Asherah, the consort of, was it El? The Canaanite god?
Yeah, El. So it's like Smith is drawing from these older traditions, these alternative ways of thinking about the divine.
Which, let's be honest, was a pretty bold move, even back in 1999.
Oh, for sure. Especially for a mainstream Hollywood movie.
So do you think he was trying to make, like, a feminist statement with that portrayal? Or is it something more complex?
That's the million-dollar question. It's Smith, so you never know, right? On one hand, it could be a straight-up critique of patriarchal religion. But on the other, he might be satirizing the very idea of assigning a gender to God, like pointing out how limited our human understanding is when it comes to
the divine, to the whole concept of something beyond our comprehension. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And that's what makes Dogma so fun to dissect. You've got all these layers, these different interpretations, and I have a feeling we're just scratching the surface here.
Agreed. I'm ready to dive even deeper.
All right, so where were we? Ah, yes. Phillips using that, what was it called?
Save the cat. Right.
Oh,
That whole storytelling breakdown.
Yeah, save the cat. Like a recipe for a good story. And he actually applies it to Dogma.
Seems kind of crazy at first, right? Because
Yeah.
Dogma is it's all over the place,
It feels chaotic,
Yeah.
for sure. But that's the genius of it. Phillips shows how even with all that craziness, there's still structure underneath. Like Smith is using these classic storytelling beats to keep us hooked, even while he's blowing our minds with all these ideas.
Okay, I'm kind of seeing it now. So, what's an example of this save the cat thing in action?
Well, think about the opening scene, like the very first image we get.
Bartleby and Loki, right? Just chilling in Wisconsin.
Exactly. And they're bored, they're bickering. They're not exactly what you picture when you think fallen angels.
Not even close. I mean, I always pictured fallen angels more like, I don't know, fire and brimstone.
You're not stuck in some random town.
Right.
But that's the hook. Smith subverts our expectations right from the start.
He's like, buckle up, folks. This ain't your grandma's Sunday school lesson.
Uh-huh, exactly. And then, boom, we hit the catalyst, the thing that kicks the whole story into gear.
Bethany getting her mission from Metatron, the voice of God, showing up in her living room.
Talk about a life-changing moment.
I
And
know.
it's so brilliantly done because she's this totally normal woman working at an abortion clinic.
Not exactly someone you'd expect to be chosen to save, all of existence.
Right. But that's the point. Smith loves taking those ordinary folks and thrusting them into these extraordinary situations.
It's like, anyone can be a hero, even if you work in an abortion clinic and your cousin is trying to sell fake buddy Christs.
Huh. That's Dogma in a nutshell. But yeah, Phillips is pointing out how this catalyst beat, it sets up Bethany's whole journey. She's got to go from this average person to someone who can actually face down.
Fallen angels.
Yep. And maybe even God herself.
Okay, so that's Act 1 stuff. What about the middle of the movie? It gets pretty wild. They meet all those crazy characters.
Right, that's the fun and game section. And it's where Smith's humor really shines. We've got Rufus, the 13th apostle.
Who drops some serious truth bombs. Like Jesus being married. That's a whole other deep dive.
Definitely. Then there's Serendipity, the muse who's lost her mojo.
And who can forget the Golgothan shit demon? Seriously, what was Smith smoking when he came up with that?
Uh-huh, right. But even that, the most outrageous element of the movie, Phillips argues it has deeper meaning.
Okay, I'm listening.
Yeah.
How does a demon made of poop have deeper meaning?
Well, think about it. The Golgothan is born from all the negativity in the world, right? Our hate, our fear.
It's literally a manifestation of our crap.
Exactly. It's like a physical embodiment of the idea that our thoughts, our actions, they have real consequences.
Whoa, that's actually kind of profound.
Right. And it's all wrapped up in this hilarious, disgusting package. That's Smith's genius.
Yeah.
He makes you laugh, but then,
But then he makes you think.
bingo! And that's how he gets away with tackling such big, controversial topics. He sneaks them in under the cover of humor.
Okay, so we've got the opening, we've got the crazy road trip. What about the ending?
Well, it all builds to that epic confrontation, right? Bethany versus Bartleby. The forces of good and evil duking it out.
And Bethany sacrifices herself, full-on martyr mode.
Yeah, it's heavy stuff. But then she's brought back to life by God in this amazing act of grace.
Which, again, subverts expectations, right?
Yeah.
Because God is this.
Powerful woman who ultimately chooses mercy over judgment.
Whoa, yeah, that's a whole other layer to unpack.
Yeah.
But I think we're running out of time here.
Yeah, we are. But the point is, this Save the Cat analysis, it shows how Dogma is more than just a funny, irreverent movie.
It's actually a really well-crafted story with a clear structure, a beginning, middle, and end.
And that structure helps to deliver those powerful messages about faith, doubt, free will, all that good stuff.
So even though it's a wild ride, it's a ride that takes us somewhere thought-provoking.
Exactly. Now, Phillips takes this even further. He starts comparing Dogma to other works that explore similar themes.
Oh, yeah, like the Da Vinci Code and that crazy, what was it?
The Historical Illuminatus Chronicles. Yeah, that one's a trip.
It is. And it's so different from Dogma on the surface, but
Underneath, they're both grappling with those same big questions about faith, authority, the nature of reality.
oh, okay. I'm seeing the connections now. We're about to go down another rabbit hole, aren't we?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it'll be worth the journey. Okay, so ready to go down that rabbit hole. I think we left off talking about how Dogma connects to other, mind-bending works out there.
Yeah, we were just getting into the historical Illuminatus Chronicles, right? Which, man, that book, it's like a conspiracy theorist's dream come true.
Totally. It's got secret societies, hidden agendas, alternative histories, all that juicy stuff.
And it's presented in this really playful, satirical way, which, that reminds me of Dogma. Like, both of them use humor to make you question everything you thought you knew.
Exactly. It's like by laughing at the absurdity of it all, you kind of open yourself up to new possibilities, new ways of seeing the world. You're less likely to just accept things at face value.
Right, right. You start thinking, wait a minute, maybe those guys in the tinfoil hats are onto something.
Maybe, maybe not. But the point is, both Dogma and the Illuminatus Chronicles encourage you to think for yourself, to question authority, to be skeptical of those grand narratives that try to tell you what to believe.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So what about some of the other works Phillips mentions? Like Lucifer, for instance.
Ah, Lucifer. That's a great example of how both Dogma and Neil Gaiman's work, they both kind of humanize these figures that we usually see as like pure evil.
Right, like in Dogma, the fallen angels, yeah, they're causing trouble, but...
But they have their reasons, right? They're not just mindless monsters. They have their own grievances, their own sense of justice, even if it's a bit twisted.
And in Lucifer, the devil himself, he's running a nightclub in L.A., helping the cops solve crimes.
Right. And he's actually like kind of charming, which again makes you think, maybe things aren't so black and white.
Maybe the devil wears Prada, or, runs a nightclub.
Exactly. But the point is, both of these works are encouraging empathy, even for those we might consider like the ultimate bad guys.
Which is a pretty powerful message, especially these days when it feels like everyone is so quick to, like, demonize anyone who disagrees with them.
For sure. It's a reminder that everyone has a story, everyone has their reasons, and sometimes understanding those reasons can lead to more compassion, more understanding, maybe even some forgiveness.
Deep stuff. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. What about Supernatural? I mean, that show's been running for like 1 million seasons.
All right, and it's still going strong, which I think speaks to its enduring appeal. And, Phillips connects Supernatural to Dogma in some interesting ways.
No, they both deal with angels, demons, all that good stuff. But, like, what are the specific connections?
Well, for one thing, both of them challenge that traditional view of angels as like these perfect, obedient beings.
Yeah. In Dogma, the angels are kind of messed up.
Yeah.
Like, Bartleby is straight up rebellious.
And in Supernatural, you've got angels who are like power hungry or they fall in love with humans.
Or they start their own apocalypse. I mean, these angels are anything but goody two-shoes.
Right. And I think both works are trying to say something about like even in the divine realm, there's still room for free will, for questioning authority, for making your own choices.
Which, again, ties back to that whole theme of free will versus destiny that's so central to Dogma.
Totally. And it's a theme that's always relevant, right? Because we all struggle with that question, like, how much control do we really have over our own lives? Are we just playing out a script that's already been written?
Or can we actually make choices that matter, that change the course of things?
Exactly. And, Supernatural and Dogma, they both explore those questions in really engaging ways.
Okay, before we wrap things up, there's one more work we got to talk about. Preacher.
Ah, yes. The comic series that really pushes the boundaries when it comes to, like, questioning God.
I mean, the main character literally has the power to command God to appear. Talk about a power move.
Right, and that's where the connection to Dogma comes in. Both works grapple with this idea of a God who's kind of absent or silent.
Yeah. Like in Dogma, God taking a vacation.
Yeah.
That's what creates the whole loophole that Bartleby and Loki try to exploit.
And in Preacher, that absence, that silence, it drives the main character to go on this like insane quest to find God and demand answers.
Which, is something that a lot of people can relate to, right? Like when you're going through tough times, you might wonder, where's God in all this? Why isn't he doing anything?
Exactly. And both Dogma and Preacher, they kind of give voice to that frustration, that anger, that desperate need for answers.
So, like, what's the takeaway from all these comparisons? What can we learn from looking at Dogma alongside all these other works?
Well, I think it shows that Dogma, even though it's a comedy, it's tackling some really big, universal questions about faith, doubt, the nature of good and evil, the search for meaning.
And these aren't just questions that were relevant back in 1999 when Dogma came out.
No, they're questions that people have been wrestling with for centuries, and they're still relevant today, maybe even more so in a world where everything feels so uncertain, so chaotic.
Totally. So, like, what can we do? How do we even begin to grapple with these questions?
I think the first step is to be open to different perspectives, to be willing to question what we think we know, to be curious. And Dogma, with its humor and its heart and its willingness to push boundaries, it's a great starting point for that kind of exploration.
Yeah, it definitely makes you think. And maybe, just maybe, it can even help us to find some answers, or at least to ask better questions.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe along the way we'll even have a few laughs.
All right, so that's our deep dive on Dogma. A big thank you to Brian David Phillips for his insightful paper.
Yes, thank you. And to all of you listening, keep those minds open and those questions coming. Until next time.
Happy diving!
Breathe deep, close your eyes, and surrender to the cards. Let the rhythm of the symbols take you far. In the dance of the arcana, see your story start to bloom. Every flip, every turn, it's like magic in the room. Tarot trance, feel the vibe, let your spirit